Sometimes what looks calm and ordinary on the surface hides something far darker and more dangerous beneath. That couldn't be truer for my story. Imagine waking up in your own home, the place you worked years to buy, only to discover a sound beneath the floorboards that doesn't belong. At first you dismiss it. Maybe it's the pipes, maybe it's just the house settling. But then you realize it's not. What's underneath you isn't natural. It's something constructed, something hidden. And just when you're trying to figure out what's going on, your homeowners association, the very people meant to protect the neighborhood, start acting like you're the enemy. What I uncovered beneath my house shook me to my core. But what my HOA tried to do in response, that's the part you need to hear. Homeownership in America is often painted as the dream, a place you can call your own, where you put down roots, raise a family, and build stability. But what rarely gets mentioned in that dream is the presence of HOAs, homeowners associations, that are supposed to keep neighborhoods clean, organized, and uniform, but in practice often end up being sources of power struggles, intimidation, and control. I moved into what I thought was the perfect suburban neighborhood. Clean streets, trimmed lawns, friendly neighbors waving as you drive by. On paper, it was everything I had wanted. But what I didn't realize at the time was that beneath the manicured lawns and the smiling faces were secrets. Secrets buried, literally, right beneath my feet. This story is about much more than just a tunnel. It's about control, paranoia, and the terrifying realization that the very people you're told to trust with community management might have hidden agendas of their own. When you hear the word tunnel, your mind probably jumps to images of smuggling operations, old war shelters, or secret escape routes, but never do you think of a tunnel beneath a suburban home in a quiet neighborhood. Yet that's exactly what I stumbled into. And I wasn't prepared for the way my HOA reacted when I found it. You see, HOAs thrive on control. They issue fines for grass being too long, dictate what color you can paint your house, and even tell you what kind of mailbox you're allowed to have. But what happens when an HOA feels like they're losing control over something bigger, something hidden in plain sight? My story begins with small, almost laughable incidents. Strange noises, small cracks in the ground, and a neighbor or two who seemed to know more than they let on. But each of those signs was a breadcrumb leading to a discovery that would unravel the very foundation, literally, of my home. This isn't a story about paranormal activity. It's not about ghosts or haunted houses. This is about something real: concrete, dirt, steel, and lies. And the closer I got to the truth, the more the HOA began to tighten its grip, doing everything it could to keep me silent. So let's start at the beginning. The first night I realized something was wrong, it started in the dead of night. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when I heard it, a faint thud beneath the floor. At first I thought it might have been the HVAC kicking on, or maybe an animal scurrying through the crawl space. But then I remembered, my house didn't have a crawl space. The sound didn't happen again that night, but I couldn't shake it. The next morning, I walked around the house looking for cracks or holes. Everything looked fine. But over the next few weeks, the noises returned. Sometimes faint scraping, sometimes what sounded like muffled movement. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to investigate. In the basement, tucked behind an old utility shelf, I found something unusual. A section of the concrete floor that looked different. Not newer, not older, just different. Almost like it had been patched. I knocked on it. Hollow. My stomach sank. I told myself it could be nothing. Maybe just a structural quirk. But the paranoia was building. And then, just as I was trying to reason with myself, the HOA president stopped by my house. She smiled politely, but her words felt rehearsed. "Everything okay here? No problems with your foundation?" How did she know? At first I brushed it off, but as the days passed, little things started happening. Anonymous notes slipped into my mailbox. Don't dig where you don't belong. Fines issued for minor things I knew weren't against the rules. One neighbor even stopped talking to me altogether after I asked if they'd heard strange noises too. The HOA was circling me, testing me. Finally, I rented a concrete saw. My hands were shaking as I cut into that patch on the basement floor. Beneath it was soil, and deeper still, a wooden hatch covered in dirt and rot. When I pried it open, the stale air that rushed up smelled like earth, rust, and something older. A tunnel, crude but deliberate, reinforced with beams, and it went deeper into the ground, farther than my flashlight could reach. I remember sitting on the edge of that hole, sweating, trembling, trying to process what I was looking at. But before I could climb down, I heard footsteps upstairs. Someone was in my house, and when I rushed up, there was no one there, just my front door slightly ajar, swinging in the breeze. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside, every passing car made my heart pound. I knew one thing for sure: whatever was under my house wasn't just mine to discover. Someone else already knew it was there, and the HOA, they weren't about to let me uncover it alone. The next morning, I found something even worse than the tunnel itself. Nailed to my front door was a letter in bold black ink. I didn't sleep the night after finding that letter on my door. I sat on the couch, the lights dim, a baseball bat in my hand, waiting for something, anything to happen. The neighborhood outside looked calm, but I knew that calm was a mask. The HOA had sent a message, and they weren't playing games. By morning, my fear was laced with anger. Who were they to tell me what I could or couldn't do in my own home? This was my property, my foundation, my life. And yet, for the first time, I realized I wasn't the one in control. I went to the tunnel again. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I lowered myself into it. The soil walls pressed close on either side, and the wooden beams groaned with age. Every step I took echoed with a hollow weight. The tunnel stretched farther than I imagined, 30 feet, 50 feet, maybe more. At one point, it curved sharply, and I swore I heard something ahead, like a faint metallic clang. When I turned the corner, my heart froze. Carved into the dirt wall was a symbol, a circle with an X slashed through it. I didn't recognize it, but it looked deliberate, like some kind of warning or claim of ownership. I took a shaky photo with my phone. That was when I heard it, the sound of movement behind me. Someone else was in the tunnel. I spun around, my flashlight shaking in my hand, but the passage was empty. Still, the faint echo of footsteps lingered, as though they had just faded into the earth itself. I bolted back to the basement, slamming the hatch shut. The HOA steps in later that afternoon. The HOA president returned. This time she didn't smile. "We've received complaints," she said, her voice low and tight. "Construction noise. Unauthorized work. You'll need to submit a request before making changes to your property." I stared at her, my mouth dry. She cut me off. "Just know we'll be watching closely." It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Over the next week, the harassment escalated. I received fines for things that weren't even in the bylaws: unapproved landscaping, improper waste disposal. Neighbors I'd once chatted with now avoided me. One even muttered, "Just let it go," before walking away. But I couldn't let it go. Not after what I'd seen. I began researching the land history. Old property maps, county records, anything that might explain why a tunnel would exist beneath my home. At first, nothing stood out. But then I found it. A document from the 1940s mentioning subterranean access points built during wartime for emergency storage. Could the tunnel be one of them? And if so, why was the HOA so desperate to keep it hidden? One night, unable to resist, I returned to the tunnel. This time I was prepared. Extra flashlights, a rope tied to the hatch so I wouldn't lose my way back. The deeper I went, the stranger it became. At one point, I found rusted metal piping running along the wall, as if utilities had once been routed underground. Further in, I stumbled upon a rotting wooden crate half buried in the dirt. Inside were scraps of paper, old tools, and something else, a tarnished key. I pocketed it, not knowing what it unlocked, and then I found something even more disturbing: a door, metal, rusted, bolted into the earth itself. It didn't belong in a tunnel like this, and it was locked. I ran my hand over its surface. On the center was the same symbol I had seen earlier, the circle with the X. When I pressed my ear to the door, I swore I heard faint movement behind it. Breathing. That was when my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Leave it closed." I dropped my phone in shock, the light flickering across the dirt floor. My hands trembled as I stuffed it back in my pocket and hurried out of the tunnel. The watchers. The next morning, I noticed something new. A black SUV parked at the end of my street. No plates, no movement, just sitting there. The same SUV appeared the next day. And the day after that, I confronted one of my neighbors, a man named Bill who had always been friendly before. "Bill," I asked, "what's going on? Do you know anything about that tunnel?" His face went pale. He looked around nervously, then leaned in close. "You shouldn't be asking questions. The HOA, it's not just an HOA. They're involved in things you don't understand." Before I could press him further, his wife came to the door and pulled him inside. That night, Another letter appeared. This one slid under my door. Final warning, breaking point. I tried going to the police. I showed them the photos of the tunnel, the threats, the letters. The officer listened, scribbled some notes, but in the end, he shrugged. Sounds like a property dispute. HOA stuff, not really a police matter. They didn't believe me. Or worse, they didn't want to get involved. I felt cornered, isolated, but I wasn't ready to give up. I decided I would open that door in the tunnel. I returned with tools, a crowbar, a hammer, and the key I had found. The tunnel was colder this time, the air damp and heavy. I reached the door, inserted the key, and to my shock, it turned. The lock clicked open. My pulse hammered as I pulled the door. It screeched with rust, the sound echoing down the tunnel like a scream. Behind it was another passage, narrower, darker, lined with bricks instead of dirt. And at the far end, light. I stepped inside, my flashlight sweeping across the walls. Strange markings, graffiti, symbols I didn't understand. Some looked recent. Then, halfway down the passage, I froze. Scrawled across the wall in red paint were the words. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a forgotten relic. The HOA owned this. They were using it. I pressed on, my breath shallow. At the end of the passage was a chamber, small but unmistakably man-made. Inside were folding chairs, a table, and stacks of boxes. I opened one and my blood ran cold. Inside were files, folders marked with names of neighbors, detailed records, finances, habits, even photographs taken without them knowing. The HOA wasn't just managing the neighborhood. They were surveilling it. As I rifled through the files, I heard it, the metallic clang of the door behind me shutting. I spun around. Standing in the tunnel was the HOA president, flanked by two men I didn't recognize. She stepped forward, her expression cold. "You should have listened," she said. "This isn't for you." My mouth went dry. "What is this place?" Her eyes narrowed. "It's order, control, protection, and you're jeopardizing it." One of the men pulled something from his pocket, a pair of zip ties. Panic surged through me. I bolted past them, shoving hard, sprinting down the tunnel. My flashlight bounced wildly as I scrambled back toward the hatch. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but adrenaline carried me. I slammed the hatch shut behind me and locked it. For a moment, silence. Then, bang, a fist pounding from below. The pounding stopped, and then, from beneath the floorboards, I heard her voice, calm, steady, chilling. "If you won't keep our secret, then you can't stay here." My phone buzzed with a new message. The eviction notice wasn't a bluff. Within days, the HOA began their assault. Letters stacked in my mailbox, each demanding I vacate. Neighbors whispered as I walked past, their eyes darting away like they were afraid to be seen talking to me. And the black SUV never left the street, but I wasn't going anywhere. This was my house, my home, and I wasn't going to be bullied into leaving without answers. One night, I made my decision. I would expose them. I packed a backpack with supplies, camera, batteries, water, and the files I had stolen from the tunnel chamber. If I could document everything, maybe I could finally make someone believe me. With shaking hands, I pried open the hatch once more. The tunnel yawned beneath me like the throat of some beast. I descended, flashlight in one hand, crowbar in the other. The air grew colder the deeper I went, and when I reached the door with the X symbol, I felt it before I heard it, the vibration of movement ahead. I pushed forward. The chamber was alive with activity. Folding chairs set up in rows, more boxes stacked high, and in the center, a table with maps spread across it, and surrounding that table were people. Not strangers, neighbors, faces I'd waved to for years, faces I thought I could trust. They were in the middle of a meeting. Papers shuffled, voices murmured, decisions made like some kind of underground council, and at the head of the table, the HOA president. Her voice carried through the chamber. "We need to accelerate. Too much attention is on this house. If he keeps digging, others will notice." My stomach twisted. They weren't just protecting a secret, they were plotting something bigger. I raised my camera and snapped a photo. The flash lit up the room, dozens of heads turned. "Get him!" Chairs toppled as people lunged toward me. I turned and ran, the tunnel erupting with footsteps and shouts. My flashlight beam shook wildly against the dirt walls as I sprinted, heart hammering. Hands grabbed at me, but I swung the crowbar, breaking free. I stumbled, scraped my knees, but pushed on. I reached the hatch, scrambled up. and slammed it shut just as fists pounded against it from below. For a moment, I collapsed on the basement floor, gasping, drenched in sweat. The pounding stopped. Silence fell. And then came the sound that froze my blood, the creak of the hatch unlocking. Somehow they had another way out. I bolted upstairs, out the front door, and into the night. My legs carried me down the street, past the SUV, past the rows of perfect houses hiding imperfect secrets. I didn't stop until I reached the gas station on the main road. I called the police again. This time I didn't beg. I demanded. I showed them the photos, the files, the bruises on my arms from being grabbed. I made enough noise that they couldn't ignore me anymore. An investigation was launched, but that wasn't the end. Not even close. The days that followed were a blur. Law enforcement combed the tunnel, seizing boxes of records, maps, and surveillance equipment. It turned out the HOA had been running what they called an internal security network. But it was more than that. They weren't just monitoring lawns and mailboxes. They were tracking residents' every purchase, every routine, every private detail. They used the information to manipulate, to control votes, to push out families who didn't conform. The tunnel wasn't just storage. It was their headquarters. Neighbors I thought were friends admitted they had known something was off but were too scared to speak up. Some had even attended the meetings, convinced it was for the good of the community. The HOA president was arrested on charges ranging from trespassing to illegal surveillance. But many of the others walked free, claiming ignorance or coercion. As for me, I was left with a house scarred by secrets. The tunnel remained sealed off now, guarded by warning tape and legal notices. Every time I walked past the basement, I felt a chill, remembering the sound of footsteps in the dark. But I also felt something else. Relief. I had stood my ground. I hadn't let them bury me with their lies. The neighborhood changed after that. Some families moved away. New faces appeared. The black SUV disappeared for good, and though the houses looked the same, I knew the truth. The dream of the perfect suburban community? It was just that, a dream. The reality was far darker. And every time I heard the phrase HOA rules, I couldn't help but shudder, remembering how close I came to losing everything beneath my own home. If you've made it this far, thank you. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the biggest dangers aren't in the shadows of faraway places. They're right under our feet, hidden behind the smiling faces of people we think we can trust. I told this story not just because it happened to me, but because it could happen anywhere. Shows hold enormous power over people's lives. And while not every one of them is hiding a tunnel beneath your house, the lesson is clear. Question what doesn't feel right. And don't let anyone silence you when you're searching for the truth. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat during this story, if you felt the same shock and fear I did, then please don't let this video end here. Hit the like button so more people can discover this story. Share it with friends and family. You never know who might need to hear it. Most importantly, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you would have done if you found that tunnel. Would you have gone down there? Would you have confronted the HOA? I want to know. And if you haven't already,